Hi guys, Infinite Recap here. Today, we're going to take a look at a prehistoric animation of early humans and dinosaurs in a very dangerous jungle landscape tens of millions of years ago. Today, I'm going to explain an animated action and adventure series called Primal. Primal starts out with a fish swimming in green water. A spear drives through the water and through the fish, and we get a glimpse of a man, a kind of a caveman of a sort, or Neanderthal, with huge gorilla arms and a muscular physique. The kind of man nobody would want to tangle with. His name, appropriately, is Spear. He has his fish and he strings it to all the other fish he stabbed, and he sits content upon a rock in the middle of the stream. And then, a giant prehistoric crocodile, 10 times Spear's size, leaps from the depths and tries to snap him into its clutches, but Spear is quick, diving into the water, swimming like an Olympic athlete to safety. What a beginning! And yes, he goes back to get his fish. He is fearless. And then he heads home through the jungle. Spear is a serious man, but when he sees the smoke from his home hearth up in the distant valley, he smiles. Perhaps he's also a kind-hearted soul and a family man. But he's not safe yet. As a giant pterodactyl shadow swoops by, he quickly jumps into a hollowed tree trunk. Then the pterodactyl lands nearby, a red-crowned head, and it smells the fish in the tree trunk and comes too close, but is then scared off by the terrible roar of another beast. After, Spear grabs his fish and heads home, but along the way, he sees a big footprint on the ground, not far from his home. He's angry after seeing this, and then he hears screams from his hovel where his family stays. His wide body rushes towards home while having a spear in hand and runs very fast as he's desperate. As he gets nearby, he sees a T-Rex chase down his wife and 2 children, eating them all in a horrible bloody feast. Spear lets out a mighty roar of anger and rifles his spear at the T-Rex, hitting him in the side of the head. The T-Rex screeches, and 2 other T-Rexes nearby look at the bloody T-Rex. Spear rushes past the 2 other T-Rexes and jumps atop the bloody T-Rex, pulling out his spear and quickly climbing down. He jumps onto a nearby rock, utterly fearless with his spear, and faces down all 3 T-Rexes approaching, and then standing in front of him. Suddenly, a much bigger roar is heard, and the 3 T-Rexes walk off. It was the mama T-Rex calling her boys back home, and the family of T-Rexes slowly walks away, leaving Spear to his rock and his anger, and then a deep sadness at his loss. Spear trudges along, shoulders slumped over, toward a cave with a fire inside. He drops his fish and goes to a wall with a drawing of him, his wife, and their 2 children. He touches it and a deep sadness fills his giant face. But this is soon replaced by a resolute anger. He wipes off the drawing from the wall and stalks out of the cave, easily climbing a nearby steep cliff. He stands near the edge at the top of the cliff, staring down into the vastness below, contemplating ending it all. He stands there until night falls, and then he squats in sadness. Morning comes, and as the sun rises, it hits his face. He looks up. In the yellow gleaming of the big round sun, he sees a vision of his wife and children standing in sadness. When the vision disappears, Spear stares at the sky, lost in contemplation. It's time for Spear to go back to living, back to the stream and back to the fish. He spears at a fish and begins eating near the shore when a giant T-Rex slumbers towards the stream. Spear's brows furrow in pure hatred, and he grabs his spear. He stalks the T-Rex as it eats fish and trails off into the thick jungle. He catches up and lets out a mighty yell, but as soon as the T-Rex turns around, Spear sees that it is a mama T-Rex with 2 tiny T-Rexes she's feeding. Spear's anger turns to thoughtfulness and confusion. What's he to do? But as he tries to figure this out, 2 male T-Rexes arrive from out of the blue and attack the mama T-Rex to eat her young. Spear now knows what he'll do. He heaves his spear at the head of one T-Rex, striking it and making it scream in pain, while the mama T-Rex fights the other giant assailant. The battle is on. It's fierce. Spear crushes a kneecap of his opponent, but its tail sweeps him backward into a pond, and the mama T-Rex snaps off part of the head of her opponent, sending it reeling backward to its death. She then watches the mighty combat of Spear and the other T-Rexes, where Spear has jumped atop its head, pulls out a huge tooth and begins stabbing the T-Rex in the head, but Spear is thrown off. He finds his spear on the ground and heaves it with a mighty throw straight through the chest of the T-Rex, sending it to the ground in a thunderous thump. Exhausted, Spear squats on the ground and the 2 baby T-Rexes jog over to him and start cuddling and playing with him. Confused at first, Spear gets a big smile and starts playing with them. But out of nowhere, another male T-Rex swoops in and knocks Spear away to eat the baby T-Rexes. The mama tries to defend, but is easily knocked back by the new giant T-Rex, who then snaps up the helpless baby T-Rexes and gobbles them up, and the mama screeches in agony. Then she attacks the apex predator, but is no match for him. He knocks her to the ground, stands on her tail and is about to kill her, but Spear leaps into the breach and stabs the giant T-Rex in the foot with his spear. The fight is on. Spear with his spear against the teeth of death. It's not going well for Spear, despite his enormous courage. The T-Rex takes a small chunk out of Spear's leg, but just as things are looking dismal, the mama T-Rex runs straight into battle, chomping on the giant T-Rex's neck. But he tosses her sideways. He then gobbles Spear, but quickly screams in pain and opens his mouth because Spear has stabbed the inside of the mouth. Spear is dangling from his own spear inside the giant's mouth. Spear jumps to the ground. The mama re-enters the fight and Spear jumps onto her back. She is confused at first, but then seems to like the idea. So she and Spear stand fiercely in front of the giant T-Rex. They begin to charge. She uses her mighty tail. Spear slashes. They scurry around behind the predator and she runs up its back. Spear leaps off, soaring into the air ferociously with his spear and stabs it straight through the brain of their great opponent, whose eyes fill with blood as he slumps to the ground dead. The sad mama T-Rex named Fang is somber. She lies down in the spot where her children last lived. Spear sees this and is filled with understanding and empathy. He walks off the back of the dead T-Rex and slumbers slowly away from the sad scene. The next morning, he walks next to a mighty lake with happy birds chirping. He hears something behind him. When he turns around, it's Fang, who lets out a friendly roar at Spear, who is cautious and partly raises his spear. But Fang's face is welcoming and curious. Spear begins to understand as Fang lies on the ground. Spear gets a determined look on his broad face and then smiles. In the final scene of the first episode, the music swells and suddenly Fang and Spear pop into view with mighty Spear raising his spear while riding Fang, who is roaring. It looks like a prehistoric and unlikely partnership for life. Spear, with that hunter look on his broad determined face, is sprinting through the thick jungle foliage, hot on the trail chase of a warthog who's running for its life. And then, humor. Spear throws his spear like a mighty warrior from a great distance. It's headed straight for the helpless warthog, but just before it hits its target, Fang strides in and snatches the wild pig in her giant teeth, feasting nearby and licking her chops as Spear looks on helplessly and then walks off. Such is friendship between man and beast. Spear and Fang then walk slowly a little ways apart from each other through the grass that's almost as tall as Fang. They don't seem particularly comfortable with each other yet, and occasionally frowning or shooting a leery eye at one another. After, Spear rubs camouflage mud stripes over his body. He blends in with the grass. Fang thuds with each heavy step. Spear's sharp sense of smell grabs a scent from the air, and Fang smells it too. It's another warthog. Spear sees it first, but just as he's about to throw his spear, Fang sprints past him and knocks him sideways. She snatches for the warthog but misses. She and Spear give chase, but Fang is faster. Spear sees this, gets angry, but starts thinking of a plan on the go. He takes a shortcut, climbing over dead trees and then throws his spear high up in a tree just ahead. He climbs the tree, grabs his spear and waits for the warthog. It passes by. He smiles and rockets his spear straight into the warthog's belly, killing it instantly. He's satisfied and climbs down fast. And when he gets to the warthog, yes, Fang is chowing down, chomping down, and completely ignores Spear, who is obviously angry but knows he can do absolutely nothing. So he sits down on a log, angry and dejected, maybe even sulking a little. So he grabs a foot-long fat prehistoric centipede passing by and has it as a snack. Fang's face comes into camera and smells the centipede. Spear pushes Fang's face away with one hand and keeps on munching. But then he gets an upset stomach from the centipede meal and then smells something awful. He looks around to see Fang walking off after casually leaving a giant heap of fuming dung nearby. Spear is still quite hungry, so he climbs a giant plum tree. About halfway up, he looks down at the ground, as if he's wondering perhaps if Fang might actually be able to climb trees and steal his fruit from him. Spear gets to the fruit branches high up. Just as he's grabbing for a plump plum, a giant thud shakes the tree. Spear looks down to see Fang running in for another smack on the bottom of the tree, and Spear has to hold on for dear life. Yet another thud from Fang sends Spear and a plum falling to the jungle floor. When Spear regains his senses, he sees the plum next to him. He reaches for it and, yes, Fang swoops in yet again and snatches the plum, chomping on it. Spear is furious. This is war. Spear takes a run at Fang and bangs her in the hindquarters. She turns around and it's a standoff stare between the two warriors. It lasts a good while, and then Spear finally cools down, looks at the ground, and lets his anger subside. The next scene has them in a cave together with a fire. Spear is squatting, trying to go to sleep, but Fang is fast asleep and snoring loud enough to shake the heavens. Spear is about at the end of his rope. He gets an idea. He picks up some small rocks and tosses them on Fang's snout. She wakes up grumbling and hyper-aware of predators. She sees nothing and looks over at Spear, who is pretending to be asleep. Fang goes back to sleep and, starts shaking the walls again with her snores. Spear is angry and blazes at first, but finally settles himself and starts making shadow puppets on the wall next to him from the campfire. He makes his first vocalizations in the movie, imitating the sounds of the animal shadows he contrives so well on the wall next to him. He conjures the images of his young children sitting next to him, enjoying the shadow puppets, as they must have done when they were alive. Spear is joyous in this moment, but then the nightmare of the slaughter of his family takes over his mind as he conjures the image of a giant T-Rex shadow on the wall, chasing down his sweet children and eating them live. Spear isn't sure that the shadow isn't real, so he darts a quick look at Fang, who is still fast asleep. It's not her chasing his shadow children. Spear is immensely sad, but then he suddenly turns furious at the thought of T-Rexes and what they've done to his children. He shoots his furious stare at Fang, who senses this and wakes up. It's another snarling showdown, this time in a cave. Spear realizes the hopelessness of his anger and squats back down as Fang continues her stare to ensure all is all right. The next scene is a giant river and waterfall. Fang and Spear are walking by. She leads the way along the river and back into the jungle where they see a deer. Fang chases the deer, but Spear somehow gets in front and stops in Fang's path, snarling and shouting at her while jabbing his shiny spear toward her, making it clear that she can no longer take all the kills. Fang is not afraid, but seems to perhaps understand. Spear walks away calmly. He then sees the deer up ahead. He readies his spear and, yes, yet again, Fang has outflanked him and snatches the deer in her giant teeth. Spear is apoplectic, utterly livid, beyond mad, ready for a fight to the death. He uses his spear to pull the deer from Fang's mouth, so this does indeed mean war. They fight without harming each other in almost a dance of death, but then Spear jumps high to drive his spear into Fang's head. He misses and Fang bites the spear in half. Spear is distraught over his now useless weapon, and Fang roars victory to the heavens. They stare into each other's eyes, and they stare and stare. Rain has started pouring down, so the water rushes over their fierce faces. Neither will surrender the day. Spear breaks off 2 branches nearby and stands with one in each hand, held out to his sides like a warrior. He attacks. He whacks Fang several times, but Fang takes the hits and headbutts Spear to the ground. Spear jumps up and attacks again, this time with only 1 club. It doesn't work. He jumps high for a hit and Fang grabs him in her mouth, tossing him into nearby water. He approaches one more time. As they again stare at each other in a showdown, the sound of hissing fills their ears. They look to the side to see hundreds, thousands of giant snakes of all colors and stripes, curling and coiling around each other and staring at the 2 newcomers. Both Fang and Spear slowly walk backward, away from the fanged predators. They then turn around and begin sprinting, but a thunderous sound behind them catches their attention. The river has busted its banks, so a huge wall of water and snakes is headed right for them. They are overtaken by the flood and caught in a swirling vortex of river water and venomous snakes. Spear avoids the snakes at first, but several of the slimy creatures bite Fang, who is stuck underwater. Spear makes his way to the surface, but a red and black striped snake half as long as a football field pops out of the water and comes straight for him. Spear uses his amazing swimming ability to stay ahead of the snake. Fang eats the snakes that bite her and then takes a chomp out of the gigantic snake chasing Spear, which allows him to get back to the surface. But he sees that he is approaching the huge waterfall, so he goes underwater to see what he can do. As he does, the head of the gigantic snake floats by and the river is turning red with its blood. Fang now also sees the enormous waterfall approaching, so she dives down and she sees Spear coming towards her underwater with the body of the gigantic snake in his hands. She latches onto one end of the snake and Spear holds the other. They hope that they can use the long snake body to wrap them up safely around a rock at the top of the waterfall, but it doesn't work. They fall from a great height. Spear hits several rocks on the way down, but Fang falls in safely. When she surfaces, she sees Spear unconscious and bleeding face down on the surface of the water. She grabs Spear in her giant mouth and takes him to shore, rolling him over onto his back. He's bleeding badly and still unconscious. Fang lets out a groan and walks away slowly. Soon, Spear wakes up, feels the lump on the back of his head, and seems to be okay. Fang walks back up and sees Spear standing. She opens her mouth, leans down, and drops the head of Spear's spear onto the ground in front of him. They stare at each other, and Spear gives a slight smile of thanks. Maybe, just maybe, they will be good friends. The last scene opens with Spear on Fang's back, and they are hunting a fleeing warthog together. Spear fires his spear into the warthog, hitting the mark. He then roasts the warthog on a campfire for them both. As Fang is about to go to sleep, a snake sneaks up out of the jungle next to her. Just as she sees it, her friend's spear pierces the snake's head. Spear then puts the snake on the fire next to the warthog, while Fang watches and then decides to take a peaceful nap. Spear sits and watches his barbecue that he's preparing for him and his large friend. And this brings Primal Part 1 to an end. If you would like to see a Part 2, then please comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on another video. And until next time, guys, take care.